My partner, Avery, and I moved into our first place together last month. It felt like the clean restart we'd been begging for. Even our cat, Miso, finally stopped hiding under boxes. The only weird thing was the house next door. It was half remodeled and empty, with the fence removed and never replaced. The side passage to our back patio and their side passage were basically one long open lane, and we kept seeing people cut through like it belonged to them. Until one evening, a man stood in the dark doorway of the empty house and stared straight at us without blinking. After that, small things shifted in our patio like someone was testing us. The watering can would be moved, a chair turned, the latch left loose when we knew we'd clicked it shut. Miso started planting himself in front of the glass door and growling low, like a tiny engine. On Saturday night, Avery and I tried to ignore it and ate outside anyway. We heard the scrape of shoes on gravel, close and unhurried, and then a soft knock on the wooden gate that wasn't really a gate. A voice on the other side asked if we'd found the keys, like we were supposed to know who he was. I told him no and asked him to leave, and the silence that followed felt deliberate. Then the board shifted, and the latch clacked as if someone had lifted it and set it back down. When we checked, a cheap metal padlock was hanging there, not locked, just displayed like a warning. The next night, I stepped out to take the trash and the board swung shut behind me. The latch jammed, and it wouldn't lift, like the wood had warped in the exact wrong way at the exact wrong time. Through the glass, I saw Avery rush toward the door, and then she froze mid-step like she'd seen something behind me. I turned, and the man was standing in the empty neighbour's kitchen, framed by a broken window. He was close enough that I could see the shine on his lips when he smiled. Between two fingers, he dangled a key on a bent wire, and I knew it was ours because of the chipped red paint on the head. He slipped out through the empty house's back opening and crossed into our patio like it was nothing. Avery yanked the door open from inside, and I lunged for it at the same time, but he surged forward faster than I expected. His hand caught my sleeve, and his breath hit my ear, warm and calm, like he'd been rehearsing this. I twisted out of my hoodie and bolted through the doorway in my shirt, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Avery shoved a chair against it while I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers. We didn't stay to argue with wood and glass. We ran out the front and into the porch light of a neighbour who opened up after hearing us shout. By morning, the key was gone, and so was my hoodie. The neighbour house was still empty, still dark, still silent when the officers checked it. That night, our motion light popped on, and through the dusty window next door, a fresh handprint slowly appeared on the inside of the glass. A stranger used a nickname only one person ever used for me. I'd cut that person out of my life on purpose. I'd changed my routine, my number, and the places I went, and I still heard it. Graham had never been the loud kind of cruel. He was the quiet, measuring kind, the kind that made you doubt your own memory. The first time it happened, it was at a small corner shop near my new place, and the cashier smiled and said, "There you are," in the exact rhythm Graham used, like she'd practiced it. I tried to laugh it off until it happened again and again. A man on the train muttered one of Graham's favourite lines under his breath as I walked past, and a woman on the sidewalk sighed, still doing that, like she'd seen me 1,000 times. Different faces, different ages, but the same flat certainty in their eyes. I started recording little voice notes whenever it happened, just to prove it to myself later. One night, I played one back and heard something that made my stomach flip. Behind the normal street noise, a whisper slid into the audio, close to my mic, saying my nickname like someone had leaned into my shoulder. I went to the library because it felt safer than my apartment. It was bright, public, and full of cameras I didn't control. Then the front doors clicked shut early, the lights dimmed without warning, and a figure between the shelves mirrored my steps like we were connected by a string. I tried to pretend it was nothing, and I headed for the stairs with my heart pounding. That's when the figure drifted into the pool of a reading lamp, and I saw the face properly. It was Graham's face, but too smooth, too tight at the jaw, with faint seams that caught the light like a costume pulled on in a hurry. It smiled like it had been waiting for my reaction. It said my nickname softly and took one quick step closer, close enough that I smelled rubber and old cologne. I backed away, and it matched me perfectly, like it knew exactly how far it could push. I turned and ran down the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. Footsteps slammed behind me, fast and heavy, and the sound stayed glued to my back. On the second landing, a hand snagged my backpack strap and yanked, and I nearly went over the railing before I twisted free. I burst outside into a cluster of people spilling out of a nearby theatre, bright under the marquee lights. I shouted, not words, just sound, and heads turned in a wave. The thing stopped at the edge of the crowd, head tilted, then stepped backward and vanished into passing bodies like it had done this before. I didn't go home that night. I went somewhere with a locked lobby and stayed awake until morning. When I checked my phone, there was a new draft message saved. No sender, no thread, describing the exact coat I was wearing and ending with my nickname. And my deadbolt was warm like someone had just held it. The lake looked so calm it felt fake, like a picture taped to the world. My family doesn't usually do trips, so the reunion rental felt like a big deal. With so many of us, a few got placed in the detached boathouse loft behind the main place, and that ended up being me. The boathouse smelled like damp wood and old rope. The latch on the downstairs door didn't sit right, and the stairs creaked in a way that made every step sound like a confession. We carried our bags up anyway, and at the top landing there was a single wet footprint pressed into the dust, as if someone had climbed up there barefoot and dripping. We told ourselves it was from a cleaner or a kid earlier in the week. Then our shoes ended up lined neatly beside the stairs, toes perfectly even, and none of us admitted to doing it. When I reached down to move them back, the rubber soles were cold and slick, like they'd been dunked. Sometime after 2 a.m., a heavy thud hit the boathouse wall. A slow scrape followed, wood on wood, traveling along the siding like something was dragging itself around the building. We peeked through the upstairs window and saw a lantern glow moving along the dock, steady and low, and then the light dropped out of sight with a single splash, and nothing after. Our phones showed almost no signal, and the boathouse felt too far from the main house in that moment. The boardwalk between them was narrow, with gaps you could catch a foot in if you ran. The downstairs door stuck when we tried it, and the latch rattled like it didn't want to let go. I turned on my phone light and aimed it at the stairwell, more to calm myself than anything. The beam landed on a figure standing halfway up, inside the boathouse with us. It was tall and dripping, hair hanging in ropes like lake weeds, and its eyes flashed back bright and flat like an animal caught in headlights. It lifted one finger to its lips, and the gesture felt mocking, like it already owned the air we were breathing. Then it moved, fast and wrong, climbing 2 steps in one motion. We screamed and ran, bodies colliding as we shoved the sticky door open and spilled onto the dock. The boards slapped under our feet, loud enough to wake the whole lake. Behind us, the sound of wet steps hit the dock, closer than it should have been. Something grabbed my ankle hard, fingers slick and strong, and I felt myself start to slide backward toward the dark water. My cousin yanked me by the shoulders, and I kicked free on pure panic. We crashed through the main house door as someone inside finally woke and pulled us in, locking it with shaking hands. Through the glass, we saw the figure at the end of the dock, perfectly still, and then it stepped off the edge without making a splash. At dawn, we found a braid of reeds tied around the boathouse doorknob, like a knot meant to stay. Wet handprints streaked the hood of our car, leading up to the windshield, as if someone had leaned in to look. We packed and left early, and miles down the road a single reed was wedged under my wiper, still dripping onto the glass.